What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. This is Jason, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to make your very first iPhone application. This video is beginner friendly, made for absolute beginners, or maybe you have a little bit of experience programming but none with building iPhone apps. We're going to be going through and building an app like this. This is a motivational quote app, as you see here on the screen, and you can shuffle through it and it'll display different quotes and different backgrounds. And before we get into it, I want to share a little bit about my story. So actually, it was about like 3 years ago where I was in a similar position. Actually, I was on YouTube and I randomly found like a video of some guy building some app, and I watched the whole thing, and at the end of the course I had like a full-blown app, and I was like excited, and that took me down a path of where I just started learning more and more and more, and eventually I became a developer. So if there's any people out there who are thinking about going down that path, then definitely comment below and let me know what you guys are thinking. It's definitely doable. It just requires consistency. I know from an outside perspective, you can think of coding as, oh, this is very complex and very crazy. You have to be super smart, right? But it just takes consistent practice and continual learning, and eventually you understand it and you can become a developer as well. But all right, enough of that. Let's get into the coding. And before we get into it, actually, one thing I didn't mention is you actually need a MacBook for this, because Apple only allows you to build these iPhone applications on Apple products, which makes sense, right? So if you have a PC, you're kind of out of luck and you need to find a MacBook. And you probably need like 10 to 15 gigabytes of storage in your MacBook for this. All right, so let's get started. The first thing we need to do is go to your MacBook and go to the App Store. Open it up, and we're going to search for Xcode. This is a tool that Apple provides for us to actually build these iPhone applications. So you click on this and you click download, and you see right here it is 7.6 gigs, but I think after this we're gonna have to install some other things. So we're gonna let that download and we're gonna come back to it. All right, yeah, once this download finishes, we should be able to hit open, and you'll have something like this pop up on your screen. For me, it popped up on the other window. And you might not get this exactly. You might be asked to download a simulator. The simulator is used to simulate an iPhone. And with the simulator, we can actually run it and see how the code is looking on the device. And Xcode will probably tell you it might tell you have to install it. If that's the case, make sure you only install the iOS version. You should see something like this, iOS 16. It should say 4 if you're doing this now. It might say something else if you're doing this in the future. And these come built in, so you might not have to download it. I'm just mentioning this in case you guys have to. If not, you can close this and then go back to Xcode. And this is how Xcode looks when you first open it up. And now we have to create a project. So we hit create a new project, and we're going to call this motivation app. And you probably won't have a team. For this, you can use, for the identifier, you can do com dot. You can put your full name. This is just the identifier that's going to be used for the app. It's not that important, so you don't have to worry about it. For interface, we're going to use Swift UI. This is how we're going to build the application. Language is Swift, and you can uncheck all of these. Make sure they're unchecked because we're not going to use them. And we hit next. You're going to hit create, and this will create it for us. We let it load, and now I'm going to open this up. All right, so I made this bigger, and you can hit this right here to get rid of that because we're not going to use that. And we got to wait for the previews to load up. Give it a second. Depending on what kind of laptop you have, this might take longer. All right, once it loads up, it'll look something like this. And you can see here that this image is the image here, and this text is the text here. And you guys can play around with this. You can put your name or anything, and it'll show up here. And if you don't have this on your screen, then you can click on this and make sure you hit canvas, and it'll show it or hide it. So that's just something to note in case it didn't pop up for you. And all right, so for our motivational quote app, we need something first. First, I'm going to grab some images that we're going to use for the backgrounds. I already did this, but if you haven't done this and you don't have any images, you can go to Google. You can go to Google and search up Unsplash, unsplash.com. And here you can find free resources or free images that you can use. And if you search nature or whatever you want to put here, you can put like sports or maybe a town. I grabbed some of these pictures and I'm going to be using them for the quotes. So you guys can do that as well. And once you have those images, we're going to go here to assets. All right, so these are the images in my Finder. And I renamed them. This will make it a lot easier because we're going to use the name that we give them in the project. So give them a simple name. I named all of these nature 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. And you basically just want to drag these here. You want to hover over this, let it drop, and that's all we need to do for this step. Now now Xcode knows that these are in our project. So now back in our content view, we can get rid of all this code, and we're gonna write some new code that we're gonna use for this. And now we're gonna create a Z stack, and you want to just call Z stack, and you can hit enter on it like this, or you can just write Z stack and then create the curly braces like this. And then we're gonna call image, and we can call this one. And in this image, this is where you put the name of the image that you put in your assets. So whatever the name is, and right now we're only gonna pick one. So let's do nature 5. Nature 5. And for you guys, you put whatever name you guys have for the image, and you'll get something like this. And you might be looking at this like, ew, what the heck? This is the water, and it's zoomed all the way in. So we have to implement some changes to our formatting for our image. And to do that, we're gonna you hit enter, and we're gonna make those changes underneath image. And what we do is we do dot, and the first thing we have to bring in is resizable. This will resize the image for us, and now you see it looks pretty good now. And now we want to do another property on it. We want to do scale to fill. That shifts it a little bit depending on what image you have. It might shift it more or less. And now we want to assign a frame to this image. And what you do is when you're hovering over this, you can press on option on your MacBook, and then you hit enter. You see when I hit options, it highlights all of them. And that's what we want to do, because we want to use the width and the height here. And what we want to bring in here for the width is UI screen .main .bounds .width. And then we're going to do the same thing for the height. And why are we doing it this way? Because we want the specific height and width of the phone to resize the image to fit that. Because if you set a constant number, then the image will be off for different types of iPhone. Like if you have a very small iPhone, your image might be off. So we're doing this so that it works for any particular iPhone. And for this alignment, we can get rid of it. Oh, and you see here, it's pretty much taking the whole background. There's some white space here at the top, and we can get rid of that using .ignore safe area. Boom, and that looks nice. It's a nice picture. And now we need to add our other stuff that's going to be on the project, which is like our quote. And to do that, inside this Z stack, underneath the image, we're going to create a V stack, which stands for vertical stack. And in the V stack, the items you put in here will be stacked vertically. And you guys might have realized this with the Z stack, but the Z stack lets you put things on top of each other, while the V stack stacks things vertically. And they won't be on top of each other like they would for a Z stack. All right, the first thing I want to bring in is the quote. So I'm going to call text. This is how you write text in SwiftUI. And let's do test first. Oh, and you guys see it here. It's very hard to notice right now. We're going to change that in a second. First, let's do some formatting to the text. So we're going to do .font. So for the fonts, Xcode provides some default fonts for us to use. If you hit dot, you can see all of them here. We're going to use title. And one thing I want to do is I want to call multi-line text alignment .center. And this is for quotes that are going to be pretty long. The quotes are going to be pretty long, so there's going to be multiple lines. And you want to make sure that text is centered so it looks nice. And we're going to bring in the frame again. Hover over it, hit option. You get a width and a height. This time, though, we're going to use a set number. Do 300 and 350. The alignment doesn't matter. You can get rid of it. And let's actually bring in a quote that we can test this with. And I'm actually going to write the quote now. And you guys can do the same. I'm going to use Aristotle. And you guys see it's here, but it's very hard to see again. We're about to change that in a second because we're going to add a background. And in this background, you can add a color. That'll be the color of the background. And we want to go with ultra thin material. That gives us this look like right here. And we can actually add an opacity of, let's do 0.8. That makes it a little bit transparent. And in order to get our edges here rounded, we need to call .corner radius. And let's do 20. This looks good. All right, this looks good. And one thing I want to do is I want to add some padding on top of the frame just to give this a little bit more, keep it a little bit more compact. And you don't have to do this if you don't like how it looks. All right, and this looks pretty good. And you notice our quote formatting is kind of off. And something I'm going to do to handle this is right in front of the dash, I'm going to do a /n. And that's letting our code know to create a new line when it gets here. and everything after this will be on a new line. And I'm doing it this way because otherwise we'd have to use 2 text boxes, and that'll make things more complicated. And you guys can test that out if you want. You can challenge yourself to try to do that. But for our example, I wanted to keep it simple, so we're just doing a /n here, and it shifts this to the next line. And now underneath this text, we need a button. And we're going to go with the one that says title key in action. And for this first part, we put the title of the button. And you can do next or shuffle. It'll be up to you what you want it to say. You can say like new quote. And here under action, you want to click on this, and you can just hit enter, and it'll shift like this. And what you want to enter in this code block right here is actually what you want the code to do when the button is tapped. So first, let's just say print, and we'll print shuffle. And basically what this line of code is telling it is when somebody presses this button shuffle here, print shuffle on the screen. And I mean, not on the screen, but in the terminal, which you guys can access by right here on the bottom right. You click on this, and this is like you can call this like the terminal or the console. Sometimes you hear it called. And if you press shuffle, you'll see shuffle. Oh, and I spelled shuffle wrong. Shuffle. You see shuffle, and that means our button is working. But if you look at it, it's pretty ugly, and we need to fix the formatting. So to do that, we're gonna add some properties to the button underneath, and we're gonna do similar things that we did to the text and to the image. So first, let's create a frame for this button. Let's do 150 and a height of 50. You can get rid of the alignment, and we can add a foreground color of dot black. And what the foreground color does, it changes the text color. You can see dot red, but we're gonna go with dot black. And then underneath the foreground, we add a background, and this is where you guys can put whatever background you want, to be honest. I went with cayenne, but there's a lot of colors you guys can play with. And we're gonna add a corner radius like we did to the text. And our corner radius will be of 10. This looks pretty good. And the only thing I want to do now is on the V stack, you want to put a parentheses and then write spacing and then a colon, and then we can actually define the spacing we want for each item in the V stack. By default, I believe it's like 8 or something like that, but we can increment or decrease it to 0 if we wanted to. And in our case, we're going to do 40 just to give us some more spacing between the button and the quote. All right, now you see this is coming out pretty nicely. And now what I want to do is I want to shift this down a little bit. I feel like it's a little high. And to shift this down, we're going to add padding dot top. And then you do a comma. And then you can enter a number of how much padding you want to the top. We're going to do 50. And that shifts it down a little bit. And if you guys like it the way it is, then you can keep it up. Then you could keep it up there. And you could shift it higher. Like if you did dot bottom, it shifts it up even more. But I do top 50. And this looks really good. Now what we're missing is the functionality here. You see the button is still working. I just hit the trash can to delete what we had in our terminal. And now I press shuffle, it just shuffles. So let's actually handle that. But before we handle that, we're going to create a variable that's going to hold the list of quotes. And there's 2 options when you create a variable in Swift. You can use let or you can use a var. If you're going to change the variable itself, then you would use a var. But in our case, this is going to remain constant. So we're going to use let. And then we're going to say quotes. This will be the name of the list. And then we put an equal sign. And now we're going to assign the value to it. So it's going to be a list. And for a list, we use a bracket. And then you can hit enter and it'll auto complete it for you. And now we need to grab the quotes that we want to bring in. So for example, I'm going to bring in this one, put it in here. And you can just repeat the process, or you can write out each quote like do good or something like that. Somebody, right? So find the quotes that you want to use for your app and bring them in. I brought in mine. And when you bring in these quotes, make sure you do the /n in front of the person's name, just so you get the same behavior that we got here. And once you have your quotes, now we're on to the next step where we're going to have to figure out how we're going to display these in our app. So a quick way, an easy way, but you want to be able to change it, is you can call quotes here, and you're going to use a bracket again, and you can actually call an index of this list or array. And we can call the 0 index like this, and you see it's showing this quote. And if the preview pauses, you can hit refresh, show like this. And you can also hit Command B to see if anything is breaking in your project. So we refresh this, and now let's change it to 1. Believe you can, and you're halfway there. Oh, let's change it to 2. Let's change it to 6. If you do 6, we'll get an error. And the reason is because it's looking for the 6 index in this array, but it doesn't exist. So the program is going to throw you an error. So you need to make sure that you're within the index. So we change it back to 0, and it goes like this. So this is how we're going to kind of change the quote on the screen here. But to do this, we need a variable that's going to track the index. And in Swift UI, we're going to create a variable here. And this has to be a @state variable. And what this @state is doing is it's telling the view that this variable can change. And also when it changes, it can change the view. So make sure you're listening to updates to this variable and be prepared to change the view, aka the phone, what we can see on the phone, when the variable changes. And we're going to say var current index. You could also call this just index, but we're going to say current index since that's more accurate and it can change. So we say current index and we set it equal to 0. Now we can replace the 0 with current index, and the text knows what to display. You see, we don't have any issues yet. And if I put 3, it should change. The only true wisdom is that. So we're almost there. We're almost there. And I hope you guys are following along so far. If you're having issues, comment down below, ask what you're struggling with, and make sure that everything looks or matches what you have on your screen, because it's sometimes just one comma, one little thing can mess you up. So make sure it's exactly the same. All right, so now I'm going to change this back to 0. And what we want to do is we're going to want to change the index when we press the button. And we can do that calling current index equal to current index plus 1. And you might notice something with this, because if we press this button long enough, we're going to get to like 5 or 6, and we're going to run out of space, or we're going to run out of the index, and we're going to get an error, and our app is going to crash, and Xcode is going to yell at us. So how do we handle that? The best way I found to handle that is we're going to use the parentheses here, and we're going to use the modulo operator, which is a pretty cool operator. We're going to use it use shift 5 to get the % symbol, and then we're going to call quotes.count. And let me explain what's going on here. So right here, we're increasing the index of our current index to 1. And then we're taking the modulo operator of the count of quotes, which is basically the length of it. Or another way to think about it is the number of elements inside the quotes array. So in our case, we have 4. So this will return 4. And now let me show you an example of what the modulo operator is going to do here. So this current index is going to have, let's say, so it can be 0, it could be 1, it could be 2. And let's do these 3 to start. So when this is 0, actually we'll do 3 since it can be 3. These are our possible options, and depending on how long your quotes array is, it'll be more, but the example will still work the same way. So when it's 0, our current index changes to 1, and then this modulo operator is going to perform 1 modulo 4, which will return 1. And it'll basically do the same for all of these. So you take 2 modulo 2 or 2 modulo 4, you get 2. And for 3 modulo 4, you get 3. And if you're writing this, you'll probably get some errors. We're going to fix those in a second because the program doesn't know what this is, but this is just for the example. And now the big thing is what happens when we get to 3. Because when we get to 3, we add 1, and now we get to 4. And if you guys remember, if we put 4 here, it's going to break our project. So what the modulo operator does, so the way the modulo operator is basically working is it takes this number and it divides it by the number that you have here, which in our case is 4, and it returns a remainder. And when I say divide, it divides it in terms of a whole number. So 1 divided by 4, there is no whole number that gives you that. So it's 0, and the remainder is 1. And that's what the value that it's returning. It's returning the remainder. So then when we get to 4, you see here that 4 modulo 4, it does divide. It does give you a whole number. It gives you 1. But there is no remainder when it gives you 1. So this actually returns 0. And this will be the loop that happens with this operation here, because it'll go from 0, then it'll go 1, 2, 3, like this, and then it hits 4, and then it resets. But more on the modulo operator, let's say for some random reason you have 10, right? which in our case it won't happen, but I just want to elaborate more on the modulo operator. So you think about it, how many times can you divide 10 by 4? And using whole numbers, you can only divide it twice, because after that you get a fraction, you get a half. You can divide it twice, and what happens when we divide it twice? We have a remainder, and the remainder is 2. So this would be 2. And for 11 modulo 4, how many times can you divide 11 by 4 with a whole number? The whole number is 2 again, but this time you have a different remainder. The remainder is 3, because 11 minus 8 is 3. And that's basically how the modulo operation works. Comment down below if you're still a little confused about it. If it's not a concept you need to master, but you just have to understand what's going on in the background. And now we can remove this. And if we press our shuffle, we should be able to go through all of them one by one. And you guys might notice something too, is we're technically not shuffling here, right? We're just going to the next one. And I'm going to add a comment here called next. And the way you add comments in Xcode is you do //. And underneath this, I'm going to add another comment for shuffle, because now we're going to implement the way that you can actually shuffle to get the next index. And before we do this, I'm going to comment this out so this doesn't run when we hit shuffle. And underneath this shuffle, what we want to do is we want to change the current index when we hit shuffle. And to actually get a random number, we just call int.random, and we call this one. And now we need to define the range we want the random number to be from. So for us, we're going to do 0 all the way to, we're going to do less than quotes dot count. Because here you could do ... all the way to quotes dot count, but then we could get 4, and that would break our app. So we're going to do less than, and that way we get 3. From 0 to 3, that'll be the possible numbers. And let's shuffle this and see what we get. Oh, we get this one. This is the third index, our last quote. Then we get, oh, we're back here. And you can play around with this. Sometimes it doesn't change. Like sometimes you get the same number, but that's what happens when you shuffle. So that was just something I wanted to go over in case you guys wanted to have the shuffle feature or the next feature. And I'll keep next in my project. You guys can do as you wish. And now we're almost done. Now the last thing I want to do is I want us to be able to change the image in the background. So we're going to create another list or array, this time of images. And it's going to be a strings of these names here. So you see how we have nature 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're just going to write those right here. Nature 1, 2. And one thing to note, you want to make sure that this number matches this number. Although you don't have to, but if this is longer, like if you have more images, then the images after this index here would not be called. Like for example, if I had an image here called Jason, this image would not be called, because the way we're going to implement this is we're going to do images. We're going to go to image. We call images, and then we're going to do the brackets. And we're going to call current index, just like we did here for the text. And you see we get something like this, which, oh, this looks nice. But this one right here will never be called. And you can test this by just going through, because if if this showed up, it would break because we don't have an image called Jason in our project. So yeah, this is our project. We're almost done. There's a few things I want to add just to make it look nice. So right here at the bottom of the button, we're going to add a shadow. And we're going to do shadow and color. I wrote color because you saw it highlights it, and then now it's bringing it in, when previously it wouldn't do that. So the color I want to go with is .black. You can do dot, or you can say color .black. It's like the same thing. And we want to add an opacity to it, 0.3, do a radius of 10. That gives you a very nice shadow here on this image. Look, let's comment it out. It makes the button look nicer. And now we're going to add a shadow here to our quote. So we can copy this. So now we're going to go to the bottom of this text, and we just copy the shadow. And boom, we get that. And I think it looks nicer, at least in my opinion. You guys can remove the shadow or not. I think it lifts it up a little bit, makes it look better. All right, so our app is done. The last thing, though, is if you want to run this on your actual phone, you need a USB, of course. You plug this in to your computer, and then you get your phone, you plug in. And you guys might have to go to your device and enable some things in your settings to allow us to run it. But once you have it plugged in, it should pop up right here. And you want to click on it and hit run. And this will start building the actual app on your device. And once it's built, you can go show this off to your friends, your family. Let them know you built this cool app. And you'll have to give it a second because it's installing all of this on your device. And once it loads up, it's there on the device. And dang, this looks really nice. I hope it does for you as well. And congrats, by the way. This is the first app you built. Give yourself a round of applause. Shout out to you. And again, I just want to share that this was a similar situation I was in when like around 3 years ago, I stumbled on a video and I built an app, and the rest is history from there. So I just want to say, if you're thinking about going into the industry field, or maybe you just want to learn to build something because you have an idea, maybe you want to start a company, then just go for it. At the end of the day, it's just consistency. You don't have to be super smart or a genius to learn. You just have to be consistent, keep learning a little bit more each day. And if you're really interested in building apps, on my channel, I have an iOS developer roadmap video just to give you a roadmap, an idea of which routes and which paths to take and how to take them in case you want to become a developer, whether it's at a company or working by yourself as a freelancer. And I also have the iOS Dev podcast, which shares the stories of people who weren't developers and they decided to just go for it and they actually succeeded and broke into the industry like myself. So yeah, I hope y'all have a beautiful day. Go show this to your mom and send me tweets of what you guys build. Maybe you guys added some cool pictures or cool quotes. Let me know how it came out for you guys. And make sure you guys like, comment, share, subscribe. And I'll see y'all on the next one. Peace.
I'm riding between it all in this perfect play. I'm a piece of the puzzle, I'm a fit where you need me, baby.